All right. Para bien de todos.
Para bien.
Set our intentions, reach out wherever anybody's listening. Open their hearts, make them smile. Give them permission to be the truest, fullest expression of who they are. Let them see deep inside us, all the corners, all the shines.
Oh.
Oh my God, here I am. My favorite people around one table. This is cool. Hi, Kyle.
What's up, brother? How you doing? This is fucking awesome.
Hi, Caitlyn.
Hi. We're back.
Hi, Eric.
What to do, Aubrey?
You're so shiny and fresh back from ayahuasca. You
Yeah,
got that
man.
little glow going.
I feel it.
I like that. That's great. Well, I want to add a little structure to this because we could obviously just bullshit our way for however many endless hours we wanted to. But I want to talk about kind of a little bit of a year in review. And I know there's still a little time left in the year, but just looking back, this has been a pretty catalytic year for all of us. And so wanted to open up the opportunity to share some of our best experiences, some of our worst experiences, some of the things we learned, just the lessons from a year around the sun, lived as best we could, which is as best as anybody can do, right? Like just figuring it out, learning as much as we can. So I'd like to start with one of those hard experiences because I think it would be easy for us to talk about all the good stuff, but let's talk about the times where we were brought to our knees in some level, and I think we've all had those experiences for sure. And I think everybody does. So let's start there.
Yeah.
Eric?
Yeah, man. So this was my first year that I have genuinely experienced depression. And so kind of my life mission that I've been repeating to myself since I took Go For Your Win has been, my mission is to create the most empirically effective psychological system for treating depression and anxiety. And I had never actually experienced depression. And so God, or whatever you want to call it, was like, it's time, boy. And this past year, I said a prayer every day for probably about like 6 weeks. And it was, please bring into my life whatever relationship I need to face in order to become the man that could bring my children into the world, because I know that I want to be a father. So I said that every day for like 6 weeks. And long story short, met someone amazing, fell the deepest in love I've ever felt, and realized from that what happens when you fall too deeply in love. And I can share what that means afterwards. And then it ended. And it ended in a way that my ego had always feared relationships could end, in a way that would cause maximum wounding. And I went through a depression. The first time in my life that I didn't have hope, the first time in my life that I didn't care about my mission, the first time in my life that I didn't care about the work that I did. But because of the tools that I'd gathered, like journaling and meditating and speaking honestly with friends, and you guys were a huge reason why this went as well as it did. But I realized what happened is we all can get to a point in love where we forget our true story. And the story that we pick up out of fear and anxiety is, I'm not trying to become the best version of myself. I'm trying to become the version that I think my partner wants. So they want me. And
No, I have no idea what you're talking about. No, explain that again.
Yeah,
that doesn't
no.
make any sense to me.
I'm always being 100% myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I realized is I had found this grace point the last couple of years because I had connected to who I knew my future self wanted me to become. And I started to become that man. But then I found this partner that I was so in love with that the love became an attachment that was so strong that it took me out of my true story, and I started to live a false story. And when you live a false story, the world is not nice to you because your view of reality is not in coherence with the world. And it fucked me up for a couple of weeks. Like I lost a tremendous amount of weight. I got no work done. Thank God you guys are so nice, because I wasn't getting shit done.
Your no work done is a relative sliding scale, but all right, we'll allow that to slide.
Yeah. And it was actually through sharing like my truth with all of you. Like I was going on so many walks with everybody here that I realized that I was in a false story. And it's like the moment that I was aware of that, I was like, oh.
What was your false story?
So kind of the structure of a story is you have the idea of who you are, you have the idea of who you want to be, and then you have your strategies for trying to get there. My true story is the person I'm trying to be is my potential. And I listen to my intuition about what things to do in order to manifest that. My false story is I want to be the partner I think she wants. And so instead of listening to my intuition, I'm listening to this weird Frankenstein thing where I'm trying through my fear and anxiety to predict what she wants. So the compass is fucking broken. It's not my intuition, it's my fear being like, oh, you have to be like this, you have to be like this. And her higher self was repulsed by that story. Like that was not the story that she was originally attracted to. And it put me in the spot where I'm not in alignment with my true self. This false story that I'm seeking is making her go further away. I have nothing. There's a much deeper point that I realized that without getting into the details to protect the privacy of my mom and the partner is that it played out my fundamental mother wound. And I realized it on a random Saturday, more than microdosing at the office journaling. And it was like the fucking clouds parted. And I was like, oh, this is my like love wound. And like once I became aware of that, I realized, my partner can't fix that for me. I have to be that for me. And like, I just snapped out of it. And the deep lesson was, in order for me to have a life of meaning, I have to follow my true story. My true story is to manifest my potential, and the compass is my intuition. It's not trying to be the ideal partner for someone else and then listening to fear. And that was mine.
That's really, I think that's something a lot of people can resonate with, and certainly I can. And I was not planning on going next, but I will, because mine dovetails so well with that story, because I think I've been in part living false stories to a certain degree. Not necessarily a false story, but just the exaggeration or the leaning towards a certain expression of myself, or a dedication of a certain expression of myself. Basically, to compete with everybody else who, because I was in the relationship with Whitney for a good portion of the year. And I think this year has been becoming aware of how much I had dedicated my life to the competition with both phantom and real partners that she had, trying to compete in this gnarly open relationship paradigm experiment that I've been in.
The arena.
No doubt. But this is a particularly visceral gladiatorial, combat with multiple people. It's like more like a melee, where there's tigers and fucking
pinata fight.
It's the pinata fight. And I was the dude with my head stuck through the fucking ropes, taking a Kyle Kingsbury right hand hook to the ear hole repeatedly. And, I've had to do a lot of walks out here with you guys, and again, also, tons of gratitude for that. But I think one of the things is I was born and bred to compete in a certain way. Like I was competing from when I was really young. So the idea of competing is something that's deeply within us all. Like it's a huge part of our ego. And if you want to know about your ego, know that your ego wants to win. Like that's what the ego wants. It's the signature of the ego, and it wants to win. So if you have a lover and that lover is kind of escaping or on the fringe, or it has other people or something like that, your ego is going to get really activated, and it's going to do whatever the fuck it can to win. Right. Yeah. And I think for me, the start of the open relationship, I was kind of leading the charge and finding other lovers and kind of pulling away. And I'm sure Whitney experienced, some of that same reaction as well. And then towards the last 2 years in particular, the kind of, the table has shifted a little bit, and it's been me that's been kind of reaching and kind of chasing to a certain degree to try and compete with all of the, other people that she was seeing, and also really compete with this idea of what would be the type of person that she would just be like, you know what, fuck everybody, nobody else matters, right? Like this mythical place, which I actually didn't even want, but like I wasn't even aware that I was really chasing. So as like different levels of the relationship have kind of unraveled, I've realized how much of my life was dedicated towards a subconscious competition with real and kind of mythical other kind of people. You know what I mean? And then, so it's not that I wasn't being me, but I was always stressed that I was, competing and losing a battle between, these other mythical people, rather than just focusing on how much I can be the best version of the truest version of me, And so as the relationship releases, it's been so long that I've been in that paradigm, and I've probably always been in that paradigm to a certain degree. I think during our relationship period, I had such a level of kind of comfort from you that I didn't really have that same thing. And I was more competing against my own expectations of myself rather than like anybody else that I was hypothesizing that could be better than me. But, and at the same time, then certainly...
You had to call in more dragons, right?
Yeah.
What does the hero do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Bigger dragons.
And that was, I don't think I've really even fully become aware of that until really recently. And the thing is, as Whitney's as we've released some of these bonds, then it's not only realizing like, wow, I was playing this fucking game where I'm competing with everybody subtly and competing. Like when I'm in the gym, I'm thinking about if I'm getting stronger than them. And when I'm checking my bank account, I'm wondering if I'm richer than them. And when I'm, posting something, I'm wondering if I'm more influential than them. And if I'm doing this, like all of these things, which have been somewhat productive, but also like just compounding stress inside my body to like a huge degree. So it's realizing how much I've been doing that. But then in the absence of, the relationship construct with Whitney and like trying to release that, then it's like, oh wow, like what am I even doing? Does it matter? Like, cause my purpose was so driven towards that thing for so long. Like you had a shorter stretch, and it was obviously gnarly.
Fuck,
in that short
7
stretch.
years, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. But I had such a long stretch that I've felt those kind of like, wow, what am I even doing?
Yeah.
Like, what is my purpose here for? So it's been kind of this moment of like realizing and waking up and recalibrating, being like, oh wait, I need to do things for me now. Huh.
And I get to
do things for me now, which is incredibly liberating and freeing. And also not only liberates me, but liberates her. Because what a burden to place on your partner too.
Yeah, man.
And like, it's not fair under any, or productive or helpful under any circumstance. It's not good for either side.
No.
It's just it's the signature of codependency to a certain degree, right? Like if you're doing something to impress somebody else, you're not living your freest, most authentic truth.
Sure.
And it's not that I haven't been honest about it, but I haven't seen it. So I haven't been able to actually be authentic. I think there's a difference between authenticity and honesty. Like I've been very honest, but I haven't been very authentic to myself, because not only maybe what I was doing would be similar, but why I was doing it would have been different. It would have been like untainted by this kind of competitive paradigm and this codependent paradigm.
Yeah.
So now I'm coming out of that, and it's like, okay, well now what do I want to do for me and for the world?
Yeah.
And I think when Don Howard passed, that was like a real clarion call for me, because he was so dedicated to service, and I was dedicated to service and myself, and also trying to impress Whitney. Like that was like the three heads of the Hydra. Yeah, exactly. That were always like breathing fire. And now like stepping out of that, it can be like, okay, like I'll still do things for me, I'm sure, because I'm part of the all, the good of all. But like, how can I have a much stronger purity of purpose?
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to figure that out now. But it's exciting. It's exciting to like imagine what the world looks like when I'm not in competition with real or imagined other people.
When you have a third more extra energy.
Yeah, at least, at least,
At least,
because,
yeah, I was being
because
nice.
you fight with the Hydra's head. That's like that's the most pressing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like the one, like you can't fight all three heads at once. Right. Like, so like that was the thing that was really biting and snapping and blowing fire up my ass. Like that
It took
was,
more than a third of your bandwidth. for
yeah,
sure.
it did.
There's no question.
It
Hard to
did.
quantify, but no
Yeah.
question.
And again, so like now it's like, okay, all right, now I get another opportunity for that. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss
sure.
I didn't miss the old way. You always miss the old way.
Yeah.
Like I miss, like I'm going in the gym now and I'm like, wait, why am I lifting again? Oh, because I feel good. Oh yeah, that's why I'm lifting, not because I'm trying to get fucking yoked, son.
Well, I think sometimes we think we miss something, but it's just because we don't remember what it's like not to have it be that way, and allowing yourself to have that appreciation for the space. Otherwise, you might call it back in, because if your energy goes towards longing for the old way over and over again, that energy out there is listening. Might be like, all right,
Yeah, you're
here you
right.
go.
You're right, and that's
So
the
put in
courage
time.
to leave the shores of the known. You know, I think it's a great. I forget who said it. Might have been Paul Selig who says it's not that we're afraid of the unknown. Nobody's afraid of the unknown. You can't be afraid of something you don't know, but you're afraid of leaving the known. And I think there's not only this vacuum that's been created, but there's also this fear of like, oh shit, do I even know what I want to do now? You know, like, why am I lifting and working and making for service and for, okay. But it's like the whole thing is reoriented and it's different.
Yeah.
And those new, like that new bridge to the new way is not fully solid yet.
It really is like coming out of an addiction. You're like,
Totally.
what do I do with my like free energy in my life now?
Yeah. And what do I do with real freedom and like autonomy of choice, you know, without these subconscious things guiding and dictating my actions?
And like what blows my mind is look at what's been created with a Hydra head attacking
It blows
you.
my mind too. to be
Imagine what
honest.
the next 6 years could look like if one of the Hydra's heads were just sealed off.
Yeah.
Like-
and how much better that's going to be for Whitney too, to not have to bear that, you know, because she could feel that too, right? Just like your girl could feel you kind of chasing that.
For sure.
You know, she could feel that energy, and that's a huge burden to place on somebody, which is I think why inherently people push that away. They're like, no. You know, which so like the more you get caught up in that paradigm, the more you get kind of like pushed away, because it's like, no, we want you to, like, everybody really at the soul level wants everybody to live their actual purpose, not to go chasing
That's
their
love.
desires. That's love. And the soul is love. Soul always sees through the eyes of love. And so I think from the soul communication, they're like, you know, back off this one. He's off his, you know, he's off
Amen.
his purpose.
And I see that in hindsight. Like,
Yeah.
and
You just got
thank
you just got the shortened version. Yours was actually a little gnarlier in some aspects.
All
though.
had the 7-year ayahuasca journey, and he took the 5 MEO trip,
Yeah, exactly.
not to the upper level.
Yeah,
It's what the universe wanted.
it always is.
Well, speaking of addictions, I guess I could go next. This year has been massive for me, and in so many ways. But to sit here with all of you right now, relaxed and, you know, reflecting, is such a gift, because when I started my journey as a coach for this program, I didn't realize it because I'd never really heard the term, but I kind of had imposter syndrome. Like I'd been in our community, our little nucleus of consciousness and self-work, and we've done so many journeys together. And I had a sense of, you know, my medicine, and I felt internally ready. But when I was given the title to be a coach for this community and start serving the medicine, there was a subtle fear that kind of stepped in, and we went through, you know, months of work with the group, and I found a stride, and I felt comfortable, and I felt confident, and I felt you know, I felt like, okay, I was really getting into the role of owning that I was a coach and connecting with everyone. And then I went to Burning Man, my ultimate playground, and one
Ceremony.
of the my massive ceremony, lots of ceremony here. Burning Man really is a medicine and a ceremony space like well, not like no other, but
Well, it is like no other.
it is like no other.
It's genuinely like no other.
Tell me about this
In
Burning
terms
Man.
of intensity, it rivals anything, if not surpasses it. And even though, you know, it also looks like a big music festival and a big freaking party, but
And it's all the above, actually.
it's all of the above. It's all of the above. And it's where I feel most myself. So usually. So
The first day.
I always think I feel most myself there. I love to costume and I'm really passionate. And I just come alive in this whole liberated sense with no inhibitions. And I feel like that's really where I am the most free. And the interesting thing that I hadn't recognized as much until I went through this was that I've struggled with my shadow, and I've struggled with addictive tendencies, and we all have our own addictions. Some of them might be competition, and some might be substances, and some might be, not having an off switch or being self-destructive. And I battle with that there. That's my, if we have an ayahuasca journey, there tends to be one really dark night. And I always have a moment at Burning Man. It seems to get worse every year for some reason, because the medicine's still trying to teach me something. And this year was special because I was going to be camping with members of Fit for Service, and we had a special day planned where we all came together. We did a cold plunge on the playa. We, dropped into meditation. We hugged, we cried. We had this beautiful experience. This was Wednesday. And I'm feeling pretty great about myself because I've got a very fulfilling path as a coach. I'm in my wonderland. I'm with my best friends. And then the shadow starts coming up and starts subtly steering the ship. And I ended up having probably the hardest night of my life. I overindulged to be as vague as possible without getting into too many messy particulars. And I literally I hit a point where I was losing my conscious self, and the full shadow, the full inner demon was really at the helm of the ship. And it really brought me to my knees. I ended up having a really bad episode publicly at sunrise in front of some people that were in our community. And I had a violent outburst. I had a total destruction of a couple of really precious relationships to me. And that was devastating in and of itself. Just to be in a place that I love so much and to lose control and to feel like I'm 36 years old and I've done so much work. And here I am again, that kind of defeat of like, wow, am I ever going to be better? And when you hit that wall, you can really want to give up, because it's like, how can I journey with so many medicines? How can I have the community I have? How can I love so hard and still be this person that I'm so ashamed to be? And coming back from that, I wasn't myself. I couldn't get my spirit back. I just felt like empty. And I felt ashamed because I recognized that when I became a coach, it was like this internal pressure of hurry, become the person that you're supposed to be. So you deserve this. And what ended up happening was, in that space, the next day after this, I was so ashamed to see people. And the very members of the community that I was so ashamed to see showed up for me like nobody else and held me when I cried. Took me to the temple, played the flute with me, played a flute with me that they gave me. I watched other people in their costumes, mourning loved ones, mourning their mistakes, and looked at the circus of all of it, but also all of the heart that was there. And it started to bring in that kind of, that recognition of how the part of me that I was ashamed to be as a leader and as a medicine woman was still very much part of me, and it was okay and beautiful. And I recognized that one thing I was terrified to do was come back into my community and talk about it. But that's what we do. The real medicine here is the vulnerable truth and the container to be able to share it with other people. And when I came back, I had a call with our community and I talked about it. And guess what? They talked about their shit too. They received me. They loved me more. And I realized that the medicine for me was not to hurry up and become the perfect person, but to be myself entirely, to be the shadow entirely, and to own it, and to integrate it, and to let it be part of my medicine and serve it, and it just unlocked something massive for me. And that was a total turning point in my journey, and a gift, absolutely a gift, and something I'm still working with, and I always will be to some degree, most likely. And if I ever overcome those little shadowy demons, specifically, there will be new ones. But now I've learned, in this container, what I do with it, I alchemize it, it's been really, really big. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
Whew. Only talked about that twice, so that was the second time.
Yeah, I think for me, without a doubt, the hardest challenge has been open relationship. We started October, maybe late September last year, and I didn't really start. It started because I had a relationship, but the medicine didn't really start for me until...
Oh, I know. I know.
Until it was an even playing field, a two-way street. And when Tosh started dating Christian, I think they had their first date night New Year's Eve. I was out with you and really trying to party and take my mind off it, and all the heart-opening medicine I could swallow, and just fucking anything to keep me okay.
Which for Kyle is a large amount of heart-opening medicine. That's a large amount that he can swallow.
He's got a really big heart, you guys.
And, it was one thing that I really understood consciously, when we made the decision to start it. And I think to a greater degree, in working with the ceremony we did with Paul, Dr. Dan, Tosh, and yourself, Aubrey, that's where I got the downloads to start it now and to not wait until we were older and the kids are in high school or college, but to do it now so we could start our growth right now, to learn from this, to become better, and that would influence our children, not to live that way. It's not prescriptive, right? But just to know love in a different way, whether they choose to be monogamous or not, ultimately to be better people for them. And again, understanding all that consciously, I had no fucking idea what it would be like viscerally to go through that, and I think Ob got a kick out of it because he too thought I would have had it a little easier than he did. But, it just boiled up, and it was one of those things, I think you mentioned this, Ob, before, that if you have a narrative that you're not a jealous person or that you behave a certain way and you identify with that narrative, you can't even look at it when the jealousy comes up. It's unrecognizable to you because it's out of your purview. It's not in your awareness that you can behave in that way. And for me, it was like just every fear possible. And I know I've mentioned this before on different podcasts, but like every fear came up. How big is his dick? Is he better in bed? He's 10 years younger than me. Does she love him? She does love him. How much does she love him? Is she going to leave him for me? All the same fears that Tosh had when I had a girlfriend. And in part, that was beautiful because it showed me, it gave me the lens in which she saw the world for a period of time. And I had deep compassion for her. And that, to me, was the only way I could possibly understand where she was at mentally and emotionally when I had a girlfriend. And so I had gratitude for that, but it was still just unfucking bearable, going through that, and it raised to a boiling point where Christian had asked if he could take Tosh to Vegas. He was doing a fun trip, and I was like, yeah, fuck yeah. That's anytime I say yes to something like that, I always reverse the situation. Would I want to go on a date weekend with a girlfriend? Yeah, so of course you can. There's no problem there. And flights got canceled. There was snow or some shit, so I offered to pay for a hotel and let them have a staycation. And first day's fine, second day's okay. By day 3, I was just so on edge. I was besides myself. And I think she wrote me like, hey, is it cool? Should I come back after naps, or when should I come back? And like, to me, in my mind, that was her asking for more time with him. And I just fucking lost it. It's like, you just had 2.5 days and now you want more time. And I was just like, yeah, whatever. I got really short with her, and she's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And so when she got back,
Totally fine.
It was almost hard for me to look at her and Christian. Like, I was that upset. And it was an unrecognized level of anger and pain and fear that I had. And so, dipping into that shadow, we started talking. Of course, Tosh could feel, she knows who the fuck I am. So when I'm off kilter, she knows it immediately. And she's just like, what the fuck's going on? And I just snapped. Bear's backpack was in the center of the floor. We were arguing outside to not wake him. And I walked through the house. I kicked his backpack as hard as I could. His tea went flying everywhere on this hardwood floor. And I got in the Prius, my getaway car, went to peel out in slow motion.
That'll show
probably in
her.
electric vehicle mode to fucking get away. She comes running after me because she's a fireball, slips on the tee, almost breaks her thumb, comes running out of the house yelling at me while one of our neighbors is pushing their newborn in a stroller. Get the fuck back here. It was a very low moment for everyone. Thankfully, I was aware. I caught myself about a quarter mile away, like, I need to go back. And I didn't understand why I left, why that fleeing the situation had been ingrained in me until I think a night later, I realized, like, the relationship I had for 7 years prior to Tosh with a woman who I love very deeply in college, that's what I'd do in fights. I'd get in my car and I'd drive from Arizona to fucking NorCal in the middle of the night if shit hit the fan. Like that, there was a pattern of that I had never expressed with Tosh that I thought was gone, and it showed up again. And, I ended up having a 5-MeO ceremony later that week with Tosh, which was incredibly healing because it showed me all the times my mother would leave when she got in a big fight with my dad. And so that patterning came in from that. And I really got to see, like, the pain that I felt when she left. And just from Tosh being gone, I was feeling some of that abandonment right there. And that I fought fire with fire. That was the way I would address that situation. It was incredible. I had all the awareness then, like, oh, that's where that comes from. And of course, in that situation, I was able to have a lot of gratitude and compassion for my mom, knowing how hard it was for her and knowing that that's all she knew she could do, right? And for my dad as well, But for me, like, seeing that pattern and then thankfully never having done that. But, the flip side to any of these jealousies and fears that I've come to know is the belief in myself, and that's something I'll get into with, the magic that's happened this year.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, brother.
Yeah.
It's, it's interesting that all of these things that we have called, the lowest points of the year, I think probably we're also the most grateful for in the year, like these things, even though my pattern lasted longer and it took me longer to kind of unravel and unwind it, like, still I look back and it's like, you can only have gratitude, and there are little moments where you're like, oh man, I wish I could have done that fucking different. But
Yeah.
if you could have, you would have. If we could have, we would have. If you could have not driven away at all and had that recognition, then you would have. If I could have, I would go through periods where I would get really angry or like hold stuff in, pretend like I was cool and working through it, and then I wasn't cool, and then all of these different ways. And you can lament those, but I'm sure you could lament not, letting things get to that boiling point and not doing
I
that.
constantly thought like, oh, what if I just did this? Just not there, just not that far. But then you might not have learned,
It all happens as it has to happen in a way. And if it could have happened differently, it would have happened differently. And that's I think the fundamental understanding to get to forgiveness. And then once you get to forgiveness, then you can get to the alchemy of like, okay, well, this happened as it needed to happen. What am I going to do now?
What's the medicine?
Yeah. What's the next best move from here? And it'll all take its own time.
Yeah.
There's no like right amount of time or like the right way that this has to go. But I think the key thing is one, being vulnerable, like being willing to admit and acknowledge when shit's your fault.
Yeah.
And like when it's your shit, because it's always at least some component your shit. Some it's always your shit. So like, and opening up and having people you can talk to about that.
Which was huge for me. Like truly, I think the reason it happened as quickly, like why the alchemy came as fast as it did, is I knew I could talk to all of you in truth, and like, it's incredible that we get to call this a job. It's fucking incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with that. I'm with that 100%. And then as you pattern that ability to not be ashamed, then you can really start to move faster.
Yeah.
You can't integrate something that you don't share. It's too easy for you to keep it fragmented. If that's one thing about the mirror that we talk about in other people, is like when you have people that are expecting your authentic truth, you can't really look at them and give them just part of it. I've found.
Especially if they see you. Like if they see you, they know. They know. You're hiding right now.
You all know.
Yeah.
Me when I show up and I've got something kind of boiling. But when you're in a vacuum, when you're by yourself and you don't have that community, it's too easy to look away. And then the lessons just keep teaching you and they get louder and harder.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, but I also recognize how squirrely I am in the way that I can trick myself too, though, like I spoke to all you guys and always got, support and good ideas and help with my own introspection. But like without me actually seeing the deeper, broader patterns, like I couldn't have seen how your specific issue played into how your mother reacted and like all of these different things. You could present the information in a way that was honest to you based on the awareness that you had, but to penetrate deeper, like we're the only ones that can really penetrate to the deepest truth.
I see what you're saying.
Of like what it really is. And that's, I think, something that I've really realized too, is that even in sharing, we can still hide some truth from ourselves.
For sure.
So it's like honing our own ability to be like ruthless with our introspection and awareness, and ruthless with our truth and our vulnerability about what happened, and just do our damn best to like find out like, where did this come from? Why am I feeling this? What am I doing? What's the truth of this?
Yeah, you got to hunt that stuff.
You got to hunt it.
You can't just passively say, well, that was shitty. I forgive myself. I forgive everyone else.
My favorite quote from Don Miguel Ruiz, he says, the warrior is the huntress who hunts herself. And that is something I use as a guiding star. It doesn't always work, but I try to keep that in mind at all times. I have it painted on my wall.
I love that.
Well, you have to, and hunting is a skill, right? Like hunting is like, you're not born a great hunter. No one was born a great hunter. They became a great hunter through practice, whether it's archery, and it's just how many arrows do you put through that target, like, or if it's shooting a rifle, whatever it is in that metaphor. But when we're hunting ourselves, it's how aware can we be? Like how much can we understand our own psychology and understand our own makeup so that we can actually like look deeper. And we might get an inkling, but we might be like, we might cast that hypothesis aside. Like, well, it could be that, but I doubt it's that.
Yeah.
It's just this fucking thing, this thing that I'm comfortable hunting. I'm hunting rabbits, not rhinoceroses here. Like don't talk to me about rhinoceroses. Like we're talking rabbits here. This is a rabbit hunt,
Well, in a way you can only really hunt yourself. Because if you you can take every arrow you're pointing at somebody else and saying, this person's doing this to me, this is what I'm feeling because of X, Y, and Z. And if you take all of those potential sources of your struggles and you just turn it inward and ask the inner knowing, like, where am I doing this? I mean, every time you're pointing your arrow at someone else, it's an opportunity to point it back at yourself. And
Yeah,
and
it's
check in.
If you point it at someone else, you make yourself prey. Like you're just giving away your power to be a hunter, and you just become the rabbit. You know.
That's where the metaphor flips, right? Like, because actually, when you're hunting yourself, at the moment that you're actually aiming at yourself, you're the prey. You know, and like you have to be. That's where you have to go. Like, oh wow, this is what I'm doing. I'm like projecting all of this onto somebody else when really it's actually now me exposing my own vulnerabilities in here.
Which
that
is
we might
actually
become
the
aware of.
strongest position to be in.
It's the only way to, it's a way to be strongest and the way to get stronger too. It may feel weaker in a little while because that anger can give us a little buttress, and give you like a little platform to stay on. You can just be
Ooh, the
like
anger
separate.
feels so strong.
It's
I'm
so
right
strong.
platform.
Yeah, I'm right.
I'm way up
platform.
here, right?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It's you know, I think everybody who has these low points, you know, these low moments, whether the output of that is anger or depression or anxiety, or, you know, for me it was all of the above, but you know, it can come out in certain little bursts. Sometimes the anger will come first, then comes the depression and anxiety. Sometimes the depression just hits, the hopelessness hits. Sometimes the anxiety and tension will lead, and it'll just be this constant state until something bursts and like helps you break through. It's like almost like plates are shifting, and sometimes the plates move smoothly, and just gradually there's continental drift, you know, like Antarctica moved an inch this year. And sometimes it's like fucking San Andreas and there's buildings falling and there's like fucking Godzilla's screaming and Mothra's attacking, and you're like, fuck, how did this go Armageddon so fast? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, but that's just the way it was. The plates were stuck. And when they're stuck, you know, then when they shift, it's not just a shift, it's an earthquake.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
That's
that's like,
really, yeah.
and having the grace to be like, okay, well, I wasn't drifting with the continents. I was stuck. And then so when I stuck, shifted. And hopefully you have some skills in how you navigate when that happens, like during an earthquake.
Yeah, do you panic and
Do you panic and start punching people around you?
do you get your center?
Pinata fight.
No.
Or do you understand, like, okay, here comes the anger. Here comes that, what the Buddhists
Like
call
riding a
Shenpa,
wave,
right?
yeah.
Like that hook. I'm hooked. You know, the earthquake is here and I'm hooked. Like, what am I going to do? I can either exacerbate this or I can try and diminish it. But sometimes that option is available and sometimes it's just not fucking available. You know,
Yeah,
but
sometimes you got to get tossed in the waves.
and sometimes I think
Gobbled up.
we actually throw a stick of dynamite to actually change
100%.
things because we don't trust ourselves. Like we don't trust ourselves to allow this to gradually move in a way because we're addicted, you know? So if you're addicted, you kind of drive yourself into a rock bottom or drive yourself into like a chaotic situation that you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah.
And
Like
that
you
was
have no
part,
other
that's
option.
part of the grace too, when you see yourself hitting a point like I did, the point that felt like catastrophe, just knowing that I called this in because it was moving too slow. I threw the stick of dynamite. This didn't get thrown at me, you know, and then you get your power back and you can recognize like, okay, there's something in me that wants something better, that wants something, it wants change in a good way and not from a place of shame or self-rejection, but just knowing that it's time.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about some of the highlights of the year then. Let's talk about our favorite moments or the moments of the year that we love the most.
Yeah. Mine came at the third Fit for Service meetup in Sedona. There was a particular moment where there was a sharing circle for one of the workshops. And it had been such a beautiful weekend up to that point, like nothing I'd ever experienced. I was very sober and I did not feel like I was sober because of the love and the vulnerability and the trust that 140 people had for each other. I'd never witnessed that in my entire life. And it was the third day. And somebody shared something that they had never shared before, except once with a therapist. And it's the type of thing that our culture is conditioned. If this is your truth, you are not lovable. Like you are condemnable. And he shared it. And I've never witnessed something like that. And like you could tell that some people were really shaken and they were really trying to not react to him the way that our culture conditions people to react. And you also saw people not even flinching. And I started weeping, and I'm one of the coaches, and I was at this thing just weeping, like I couldn't look at anyone. I was just in my lap crying. And they thought that I was crying because like I was negatively affected by what he said, but it was the opposite. I was just so grateful, and I had so much love for the fact that we somehow put together a container that allowed for this type of experience to happen. And like, I think he went through a level of healing then that he may have never have gotten in his entire life. And really all the ingredient is a group of people that loved and trusted each other. And it was so heavy that I had to leave. And I went on a walk around the parking lot and just found an empty bench and just sat there and breathed. Like, I had never been so overwhelmed by gratitude where I felt like I couldn't function. And the thing that I realized while Kyle was talking, where he had that insight that that pattern that he saw about why he left was because of his mom, is the thing that I realized is, I shared what my mission was at the beginning of the podcast. And it's because as a kid, I saw that my mom was depressed and I wasn't able to help. And I thought it was my fault. And I really feel like I'm witnessing in this group, like, we're doing the thing that I wish I could have done for my mom when I was 5 and I wasn't able to. So that was the highlight.
It's a pretty amazing thing when you see someone share the unforgivable and then watch ordinary people with all our flaws and all our judgments forgive the unforgivable. And when we forgive the unforgivable, we realize that there's nothing that's unforgivable, and there's nobody that's so forsaken that they're unworthy of the love of the divine, of course. And we can hypothesize the divine being so much better than we are, and we're here little ants on the earth, and then there's that big God in heaven that's capable of this thing. But we watched people who are ourselves and other ordinary people
Be godly.
Be divine in their forgiveness, in their love that holds no record of wrong, right? Like, and that changes the whole paradigm, because then there's nothing that we do that's unforgivable. There's nothing that anybody does that's unforgivable. We have access to like a different level of expression and permission for a different level of expression. And that changes everything, and there's some people who are really struggling with it and wanting punishment and wanting these other things for anything that would come. And you could feel those feelings, even, hear those voices like, oh my God, this is the unforgivable. But what's better than that? What's going to actually cause the healing that's actually going to stop that from going down through the generations? It's going to be...
It's not condemnation.
Nope. That's just going to impact it. It's going to build more shame around it. It's going to allow that subconscious force to then drive that action even further. But like, love and forgiveness is what's going to allow that to heal.
Amen.
And it did. We got to witness it. That was pretty fucking special. And it wasn't just that one big thing. We saw lots of little things from lots of different people. We all shared our own things, and we watched people forgiving all manner of different things. Like, I'm sure so many people have listened to all of us share our own, stuff that's come up, and all these things that we've vulnerably shared and just poured love. People who don't even know us, or people who do know us, or whatever,
This community has become the driving, supportive container in my life. Like, they're in my corner. They're constantly pouring love onto everything that I share, and it just helps me open up more and more and more. And it's reciprocatory, and it's powerful.
It's like sunlight to a flower.
Yeah.
All right, highlights. Kyle, Caitlyn?
I can go with my highlight. There's so many. It's been wavy year, highs and lows, but man, I've had a lot of highs in this journey. I think to pinpoint, probably the top one was our second summit. We went to Tulum, and I think the reason this was such a powerful experience reflecting, because at the beginning of the year, you know, it had that kind of vibe like, oh, it's a retreat and it's a bunch of different strangers from all corners of the world, and it was cool to network, and you know, there was that energy about it. But by the time we got to Tulum, something really special had happened, and it wasn't evident to me until we got there. And we're on the beach in the salty air, and everybody's, you know, hugging, and we're sweating together, and, you know, we're all staying nearby and sharing space in this really communal way. And you start to know everyone by name. And we did this beautiful Mayan clay ceremony on the beach on one of the last days, and everyone takes off their tops, and we're rubbing clay on each other, and it's like, oh, you start to connect with the real person. I mean, and I don't mean just because everyone's topless, as appealing as that sounds.
That was my idea.
But it was like we're rubbing clay on each other's faces, and we're looking in each other's eyes, and the barrier of coach to member, or, you know, stranger to whoever, just got obliterated. And everybody's really making contact in this way that was so deep and so powerful. And I had this moment of like, whoa, this is way bigger than I thought it was going to be. This is powerful in a way that that I never expected. And it's medicine for me. You know, I was trying to do my job up until then. And then all of a sudden I was like, I'm experiencing healing. I'm making new friends. I'm being held by other people and seen by other people, and asked the right questions, and learning moment to moment. And it was such a high, like wasn't Tulum like magic? And Tulum is magic, but Tulum wasn't the magic sauce there that day. It was the shift in the winds from into something that I don't think anybody expected. And we all stood on the beach shoulder to shoulder like a you know, like a bunch of warriors. Like we were all fighting the same fight. And we ran into the ocean and said our prayers. We did our despacho, which Kyle led, and threw away old parts of ourselves. And we emerged from the water as one community, one entity. And it never went back to anything different. It only got stronger. And I feel like that, for that turning point that it was something that I'll never forget.
Yeah.
Same.
Hell yeah, I felt it too. I think for me, without question, it was the turning point of open becoming the positive experience that I hoped it could be, that I recognized it consciously, you know. But you know, again, I went through that 5-MeO ceremony and started to unpack and at least be aware of where this stuff came from. But as I dug deeper, I started to realize like the flip side to the coin of fear is love. And the flip side of the coin of fear and anxiety and stress and all those things that was outward was my own inward perspective of myself. You know, and I thought back, reading Ted Decker's 49th Mystic and Rise of the Mystics were incredibly powerful, but I didn't quite grasp to the degree what those messages are. And I certainly want to revisit it again because of that. But for me, it's been realizing that for a long time, I didn't believe in myself, you know, and that truly was the precipice for the fear of Tosh leaving me, the fear of him being better than me at anything, and not just fully recognizing that the only way I'm the best version of myself is by being the best version of myself and believing in myself. And when I don't believe in myself, not only does that affect my relationship with Tosh, like we talked about that repulsiveness of living a lie, it's also repulsive when you're clingy and you're like, no, don't leave me. Please don't go. It's like, get the fuck away from me. That's not attractive. Believe in yourself. Fuck's wrong with you?
Been there. Yep.
You know, where's this confident, ambitious dude that
Terrible but true.
You know,
Yeah.
there's a guy
So
that
true.
I'm married. And you know, and that also affected my relationship with Christian, you know, because I was only letting him in partially out of fear that if I let him in fully, not just into the house, but, you know, in his relationship with Tosh, but also with me personally, you know, to let him in fully, to love him fully, to get to know him fully, I couldn't have fear around what that meant. right? And the only way I could resolve the fear around what that meant was to believe in myself, was to recognize all of my gifts and to truly embody that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken all fucking year to get there, but I've never been in a better place in a relationship with Tosh. Christian is my homie. He's my brother, you know, and it's improved just every aspect of family. It's improved the way I look at myself when I want to design a new program or start a new venture with work. Like it just silences the monkey mind, the negative, oh, you can't do that. Or, yeah, but what if it doesn't work? Like, who the fuck cares if it doesn't work? This still doesn't mean not to do it, right? And there's so many opportunities that I've had throughout life where that fear won and I didn't step up to bat, you know, or even in fighting, you know. And again, I'm not using this as an excuse for losses, but I had a vision in ayahuasca after retiring, and I said, what's the difference between knowing I was never going to fight again? What was the difference between me and my fights and the champions, the best, you know, the Anderson Silvas, the George St. Pierres? And what it showed me was that they still had all the nerves I did, but they had an unwavering belief in themselves. And it didn't matter if the guy they were going against, you know, when Chael Sonnen's a better wrestler, Anderson Silva didn't give a fuck that he was a better wrestler. He had an unwavering belief in himself that carried all the way till the end of round 4 when he submitted him after getting his ass kicked for almost 25 minutes, right? So I think recognizing that in myself has been for sure the most powerful thing, because, you know, for 37 years, I didn't have that. It would come and go. You know, when life was going good and things were on the up and up, it was easy to be like, yeah, this is awesome. I'm doing great, you know, but it was dependent upon the external. It was dependent upon life situations for me to have that belief, rather than the unwavering belief that I'm starting to have now, where it doesn't matter, you know, and I've applied that to so many things. You know, we're moving into our first home in 2 days, and we've had a lot of help, you know, and I'm just blown away with gratitude. But it has gone, as anybody's bought a home, it's very fucking challenging. You got a lot of shit to do, and I didn't know that I'd get it. And so I really just unattached to that and surrendered to it because I believed in myself. And I thought of, you know, what's the worst circumstance? We live in this house that we're in right now and we rent another year. So fucking what? It's awesome. You know, like any circumstance, if you can apply that, what's the worst thing that happens here, and come to terms with it, you realize like it's all okay, you know. And that's been the work for me. And the huge lifting point is that it just seeds into everything that I do now, in every interaction that I have. When that belief's there, the magic's there, because I can show up as my best self. I can show up in love, and I can be the person that I want to be. I can be, you know, whatever that goal is, the future self. I know that's a key ingredient. It's not the end product, but it's the foundational piece that all is built on. And I got that now.
Yeah. What a liberation from that trap of conditional love based upon external circumstances and like your accomplishments, because that thing is always a moving target and it will always move a little bit farther away from you. So you can continue to validate yourself through some means, right? And to be liberated from that paradigm where you just recognize that you are enough as you are. It's not conditional upon whether you get the house or don't get the house, win the fight or don't win the fight. Your love for yourself is not going to waver depending on these external things. Like if anybody can get to that, well, then they've found one of the big keys to a life of joy, really. You know, but if you're chasing if you're chasing all those other things to figure out why you are worthy of love, you're trapped.
And it never ends.
Never ends.
You win the fucking Olympics and become more depressed than any other point. It's like, what are you going to do? You know?
Doesn't matter. You have to win it again or win another thing or like do it in a different way. And I think that's a really deep lesson, and what a blessing that you've been able to like really find something to help you alchemize that. And that's, you know, why these open relationships can be absolutely hellish, but they also are undeniably valuable because they'll force you to grapple with some of these bigger things. Like, as you said, as anything you learn specifically, you can apply universally. And maybe you learn something specifically in the relationship construct, but then you can apply it, universally. And that's where it becomes like really magical. It's like, yeah, it may not be a fun ride. It may not end up working long term, but it's going to work as far as alchemizing and transforming you probably. You know, in some way you're going to figure out what parts of your shadow you aren't looking at, what parts of you love yourself conditionally, and what parts of you need to be shifted.
If the intention's there, right?
If the intention's there.
A lot of people talk about like the 60% marriages monogamous and in failure, right? And that's a good stat if you want to say like, well, maybe you can look to a different direction. But, you know, Tim Ferriss, I think, said every polyamorous relationship or open relationship couple he's ever met ended in failure, right? But how many people are going after it? That was
Dr. Drew.
Oh, Dr. Drew. It's like how many,
maybe Tim too.
How many people are using it with the intention to grow? How many people are using it through the lens of, this is going to be challenging, but I can do it, you know, and under no circumstances do we stop our relationship, right? Even if open relationship stops, we don't stop working on ourselves and we don't stop working together. And I think that commitment to Tosh, both of us having that commitment for one another, has made us so much stronger in knowing that. And we don't know that we'll do this for the rest of our lives. It's fucking perfect right now, you know, and obviously we, you know, add in some other curveballs that could make things shaky again. But I feel like at this stage, it's proven to be one of the greatest teachers I've ever had in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm into that. All right. So for me, I think this year, the overall theme has been recognizing, you know, who I am and a purity of purpose, because my purpose is deeply entrenched in the idea of who I am, right? Like we are beings that are purpose-driven beings. And I think for me, when my purpose was, you know, partly that call to service, which I have always felt, you know, the call to shift the world in a positive way. And I felt that from early on. I didn't know what it was, you know, but I felt like, okay, I'm here to do something important. But as that was kind of muddled in my, you know, competitive addictions, my desire to win, you know, my ego coming online and desire to win, and kind of losing that essence of myself, of like what I was really here for and what really my purpose was. I think there was a really clarifying moment for me, which was when we were facilitating the shamanic breathwork together. And, you know, Anahata invited us to facilitate because we had a big group at the Fit for Service Summit, and there was like 50 people who were going through. For anybody who's done the shamanic breathwork, it's incredibly powerful, incredibly cathartic, incredibly like vulnerable and opening. And I've always seen myself as kind of like more of like a passive advice-giving healer, you know, to a certain degree. Even if I'm holding space in ceremony, the medicine's doing the work, I'm just kind of like holding my center, you know, and in any other thing, a podcast or any other advice I give or anything, like I'm just like kind of throwing some words out there and maybe a good hug and maybe some like compassion or something else. But like, it's like very limited in my understanding of how I could actually, you know, be a healer, like be someone who really helps people. And so we started the facilitation of the breath work, and it's a invitation there, and you ask everybody, you cool with people as part of the Stan Groff kind of holotropic breath work, like touch is a part of the breath work. So you ask people, everybody cool with actual touch, and this is just going to be like loving, nurturing touch during this breath work practice. Everybody's like, yeah, cool with it. Kind of like in yoga when everybody asks, like, you cool with adjustments, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so everybody's on board, and we start, and people are like opening up and cracking open. And I start getting messages about what I should do. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of dudes and a lot of different people. And I'd get a message like, okay, now go lay your head on that dude's chest. And I'd be like, no, that's weird. Yeah. You know, like I'm not going to do that, you know? And so for the first half an hour, like of the thing, I was like, man, I keep getting these messages about what I should do. But I'm like, nope, that's weird. That's awkward. I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? And like, it didn't matter, guy, girl. No, I was like uncomfortable with it. And then finally I was like realizing, and I think Anahata like kind of poked me a little bit with like, come on, get in there. I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to listen to what my knowing says, and like listen and get out of the way, get out of my own judgments about what's awkward or what's not awkward. And whatever it is, I'm just going to do it. And something switched like halfway through that first thing. And whatever the message was, if it was like, go over and put my head on some dude's chest, or go over and like lay down and like lie with somebody, and like whatever I was saying, I was no longer thinking about it anymore. So I collapsed my own internal watcher that was saying like, you should or you shouldn't do this. What's the strategy here? What are you trying to do? And just went and directly like started listening to my knowing. So it just shifted me into a whole other paradigm of, okay, I'm just going to listen and do what I'm hearing the message to do. And it was radical, the difference. Like how much I was able to help facilitate people's healing in that process was, I mean, you couldn't even compare the first half hour to the second half hour and the effectiveness of what I was, able to offer. So that was in and of itself like the first paradigm shift of like, oh, trust that little voice that tells you what to do, and get your mind, little monkey mind, out of the way. Like get that thing out of the way and just trust your knowing. Collapse the thinking out of, just pull the thinking out of there. If you're serving people, like you don't need to be thinking about it. You don't need to be judging about it. You just need to listen, like listen to that whisper that, comes in and just says like, okay, this is what we do. And so the second I kind of learned the lesson, and then for the full second round, I was just going right in, like right from the start, like didn't matter, and whatever the message was, I was going in there and doing it. And, it was incredibly powerful. And I know that, when you watch like the real pros, like Anahata and some of the other pros they had there, like they will go do this similar things that I was doing. And if someone's like crying and opening up and like sobbing, and we had so many people who hadn't released like these deep emotions and like let their heart like wide open, they would just kind of move on from one to the other, and those emotions would pass through. I'd leave every person that was like that, and I'd be sobbing too, and I'd be like wiping tears, like, okay, where do I go now? What do I do next? Like I don't have the thing where I can't feel what other people feel yet, so obviously there's levels. Yeah, I mean, I think it's effective. It's kind of exhausting, but it was effective, and it was beautiful in a way because it allowed me to kind of really be with them. Mirror neurons were all firing what they were going through, what they were feeling, like I was feeling. And I think that's a special part of being in a community. But, fortunately I'm not a full-time healer, so I don't have to like do that every day, because that would be a lot. But anyways, finishing through that. So not only did it teach me to trust my knowing, but then it gave me a new appreciation of myself, which was, oh, I'm not just a guy with words. Like I can actually like get in there and like help people, and like hugs and like saying the right thing and doing whatever nurturing thing with like the whole presence of my whole body, like could be medicine, And so that was like this whole other, almost like, if to use the business term, like a whole other vertical of healing that I realized like, oh wow, this is possible. And with that, I think I kind of had a new understanding of myself that kind of buoyed my spirits and clarified my purpose even more. Like, oh, okay, so I'm here to be of service, full stop. It's not like I'm here to be of service with words. I'm here to be of service however that is. Like by whatever means that I have available to me at any given moment. By listening to my knowing, I can be of service, full stop. And then that really changed everything. And it's not that I haven't like forgotten about that sometimes and like doubted that, but I felt it so viscerally then that I'll never fully forget it. Yeah. And it's like some of the lessons that we'll get in these medicine journeys will be like, I know what love and God feels like. And then you're like, what? Wait, what does that feel like? I still, have those moments of doubt, but it's so clear that you can always call back and remember like, oh yeah.
And strengthen it.
Yeah. And
continuing.
No doubt. And so I think to me that was the real highlight. And as I look forward, I know that was one of those kind of pivotal moments that I'll never forget. And, as I try and, have this clarity and purity of purpose, which one of the reasons why I declared the celibacy here at the end of the year, is I know that was an area that was out of alignment, and that had strands that I wasn't tugging on, You know, it was like there was a little blanket. It was an escape into sexuality and validation through sexuality, and all of these different things that had threads that were like glowing. They were like had highlighters and arrows and like everything. Like pull me, see what happens. See what this is like. See what this fishing line is hooked to. And I've already started to feel some of these boulders start to move around inside me as I've like let my sexuality go and be like, okay. Oh, wow. There's all kinds of things that are underneath there that I'm kind of uncovering. So yeah, but that moment was probably the biggest one for me in the year.
It's a big one.
The big one. All right. We're going to go one more round here, and we're all, psychedelic medicine kind of journeymen and women. And I know we've all had some big journeys this year. And Godsey just got back from his ayahuasca down in Costa Rica. So I wanted to give us a chance to talk about our most transformative or remarkable journey that we've had this year.
Who's up?
God's fresh.
All right. So I'm not going to tell the entire story because it would take hours. So I was thinking about what would be the most digestible with the time that we have. I went and I did ayahuasca. I have never done ayahuasca before. It has completely changed my life in a way that I don't think I'll ever be able to articulate. It's just going to be a thing that's going to be felt by people, who know me. I really felt like, okay, so I'll share the most remarkable and then the thing that I think is the most transformative. The most remarkable thing is on the second night, I drank 2 cups and it felt like I experienced something that the only word for is God. And the thing that I realized is when I was 7 years old, somebody told me what heaven was. And they told me that heaven is the place that you go when you live rightly and you're there forever and you're happy. And they thought this was just, like this is supposed to make this kid feel good. For the next couple of weeks, I would cry at night thinking about what eternity meant. And I would be like, okay, so if I do everything right, I have to go somewhere forever and I never get to go to sleep. I never get to stop. And I would cry. And it was like, it was the deepest fear of my childhood. And I would pray to God, to the thing that was condemning me to this fate, to please help me forget so I could go to sleep and just kind of fade away. And that fear I now recognize manifested as my adamant atheism as a teenager. Like I wanted to argue with every motherfucker that said that God was real because I thought I was smart. Really, I was a terrified 7-year-old of this idea of eternity. Last year, we went down to Peru and we snorted Vilca, which is, 5-MeO-DMT and then DMT and bufotenine. And Vilca took me to a place that was eternity. And I was so sick and it was so overwhelming that it felt like I got destroyed and I didn't bring anything back. On the second night of ayahuasca, I asked her, my intention for the night was, what is the nature of the human psyche? And after I drank 2 cups, I kind of felt that she was there. I just kind of knew. And so I asked. And she said, what makes you think it's human? And then I said, okay, so what is the psyche? And she said, the totality of possible experiences. I was like, okay, is there a difference between the human psyche and ayahuasca psyche? And she said, same in totality, different in particular. And then I said, can you teach me something about the psyche that I don't know? And she said, what I can teach you, I can't tell you, but I can show you. And then I instantly, blast off is not the right word. It felt like I melted into like the core of the universe and experienced infinity. And it was not a good feeling. It did not feel good to the ego. It felt like words can't, but I just heard myself like just repeating love, 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 like in the face of the truth of this thing that felt like eternity and infinity and always and forever and nothing. I was just saying love, love, of. And it felt like I passed through that experience for the first time in my life. It felt like my spirituality got stuck when I was 7. Like I hit this point that I couldn't pass through. And when we did Vilka, it's like it slammed me up against that gate and I couldn't pass through it. And then I did ayahuasca and it felt like I passed through it. And then I had the most blissful, beautiful fucking experience ever. So that was the most remarkable thing, quote unquote.
I'd say. You know, what's interesting is like people can hypothesize that this is just your brain talking to you. But like when you hear wisdom that's that deep, right? And it's so contrary to like what I believe. What
you
you
guys programmed your whole
right?
life.
It just makes you wonder like, all right, you know, if this is my own brain talking to me, at least there's a part of my brain that is so much fucking smarter than me, you know, and that's just the overwhelming thing that you get from the plant medicines is like, it could be me, but if it is me, then it's me with a capital M, and this is a greater me than I've ever had access to. So it doesn't even fucking matter because that's different than the me that I know, lowercase m Erick or lowercase a Aubrey.
Yeah.
You know, this is the uppercase version or it actually is the spirit of ayahuasca talking to you. And either way, it's a different entity that you're dealing with. You're either dealing with something that's so far removed from what your normal capability of reason and understanding is, or you're actually dealing with something else. Either way, doesn't matter.
Yeah, and the thing that I would offer those people is run the experiment.
Yeah.
Run the experiment. So, and I think the most transformative thing is on night 3, I didn't have any insane visuals, like any hallucinations where I was out of the room, but the medicine was very strong. And I had this experience for the entire night where whenever something energetically heavy happened in the room, it felt like the energy would like smash into like my energetic space, and I could feel the like rumblings of having to vomit or having to shit. And I had this deep knowing of if I just get still and I breathe almost like a baby, really, like super still, my body just absorbed it like it was energy. And I had this knowing of I'm not going to purge the entire time I'm here because I know what to do with the energy. And it's just to not react to it at all. And it's like the body absorbs it. And then I started to feel guilt. Like my ego started to feel guilt because everyone around me is just turning their insides out. And then it felt like I heard ayahuasca again. And she said, it's okay that you just get it. And then I started crying. And she said it like 2 or 3 more times. It's okay that you just get it. And my entire life, I've been carrying this backpack of guilt because I could feel as a child, through my entire childhood, this resentment from people in my family that I loved. And it was because life seemed to be effortlessly easy for me compared to the life that they had. And ayahuasca just said it 3 times, and it's like that backpack was just fucking put down. And then like after that happened, after I had that download, the person next to me in the Maloka, there were 26 of us. He had like the most intense night of anyone in the room, and he just started weeping and weeping, and he reminded me so much of my brother. And it felt like my task from ayahuasca was like, I've shown you, now do it. Like just sit here and be like a diffusion pillar. Really, I felt like a tree. I felt like I turned into a tree and my roots were going into the ground, and I was just trying to give him as much support and shelter as I possibly could. And there was this moment where he started like hyperventilating. He could barely breathe. And it felt like ayahuasca like pulled my arm up, and it felt like my lung like became his lung so he could breathe. And I just sat there for 3 hours, and the guilt feels like it's gone. Like it took whatever this thing is to say a sentence 3 times, and it feels like this energetic backpack that I've had on for 25 years is gone.
Wow. Fuck yeah.
Wow. No small thing.
I really enjoy ayahuasca.
No small
We
thing.
might lose him to ayahuasca.
No small
Wow.
thing. Gates, Kyle?
All right, I'll go. I I also had the pleasure this year of doing ayahuasca at Soltara, so shout out to them for an amazing program. But I also had the pleasure of self-destructing at Burning Man and hitting a wall that forced me into a place where I felt like I didn't know what else to do to heal. And I got a message in 2015 on a hike with Anahata that one day I needed to do a ceremonial plant dieta with the cactus nopal. And I didn't know when that would be. And exhausted of options and ideas for fixing myself, after Burning Man, I recognized fairly quickly that this was the time. So after our Sedona retreat for FFS, I went into a ceremonial dieta at the ranch. And the dieta is, for those who don't know about it, Aubrey's done one with Rose. It's isolation, and you call in the plant spirit to teach you its wisdom and to embody that plant spirit and to keep it with you for the rest of your life. And the reason Nopal appealed to me was because I tend to be pretty soft and receptive and fluid. I'm a yes person. And very obviously it has spines. So I wanted to cultivate the energy of having the discernment and the strength that spines implies. And I wanted it to teach me that wisdom. And so going into the medicine journey, I had my initial approach was every day I consumed the plant. I went out and harvested some pads, which is a lot harder than I expected. There's lots of tiny, tiny little hair-like thorns. I harvested prickly pear. I juiced that. I failed at cooking it a little bit, but I managed. I got it into a flow. I consumed beverages and teas with it. I spoke to it. I wrote it poetry in the mornings. And the obvious thing seemed like it's a desert plant, right? It's in the sun all day, and it's super hardy, and it subsists off very little. So you want a very pure diet. I got rid of meat and dairy, and within some time got rid of coffee, but it took me a few days. And I would sit out in the sun naked, and I would take my food and put it in the light and run my fingers through it and take the slime of the nopal and paint my face with it and it felt like a light diet. Like I was, kind of like a balance to my shadow, which I think there's something really to. It was one of my takeaways is the shadow is going to be there, but you can energetically feed yourself light in a lot of different ways. It's not always, philosophy and creativity or whatever. You can, I think we take for granted the elemental impact of the resources that we have around ourselves. So that was obvious, and that was the first stretch. But then one thing I learned through it was, and Aubrey helped me realize this because he helped me open ceremony. So did Kyle and Mr. Ryan Giles back there. And Aubrey pointed out the polarity of boundary, which is the spine, and surrender. And what I would learn through rapidly, every day had many things to teach me, but the plant had many, many properties, not only boundary, but fear. There's an element of fear in spines. Like I've got to protect myself. And every lesson, the polarity you will have to learn with it. You can't really just pick one and not learn about the other. It's inherent. And I approached the plant on my first harvest, and I said to it, "You don't need to be afraid of me." And I recognized as I said that the plant will stop being afraid of me when I'm stop being afraid of the plant. So it was a very potent journey. But the dark stuff was what really surprised me, because I thought of it as this light plant. And I got up really early before sunrise one morning, and I meditated in the cold. And man, is that a hardy plant, because it's cold in the desert at night. And felt the sunrise together and hit my skin. And I started getting really wild. And I started kind of cultivating this wild woman energy, which I had never really played with before on this level. And I think that that's kind of like a grounded shadow. Like the wild woman can stand what she sees. And there's the cactus grows out of its own decay. So all of the nopal, you'll see them like with these beautiful paddles coming out of their dead, their grandfathers and their ancestors. And I had this shadow of me that I was trying to cure and fix. And in the moments of fear and my isolation, being afraid of the dark and the sounds of the desert, out at the ranch all by myself. And it started to teach me, like the medicine here isn't just fill your cup up with light. It's stand what you can see, look at everything and stand in the ground like a firm warrior queen and say, I can stand this. And I can stand to see my shadow too. And I had one moment too of also just the vulnerability on the other side of the fear and strength of the spines, which is, I was preparing my meal one night and I was feeling irritable and I was like, why am I feeling like this? And I suddenly in that space and silence, I was able to recognize like the irritability was guarding me from this vulnerable feeling of recognizing that I was doing all this work and I felt like I didn't have anyone to come home to, like a child or a partner or something to celebrate with me. And I just started weeping. And that, to create space for yourself and stillness for yourself, you didn't need a psychedelic to show me that. I just needed the space and the devotion to show myself that. And that's something I took away, giving myself days of being that aren't filled with obligations and activities and noise, so I can see what comes up for me, so I can contemplate and feel into my deeper reality. It was the most extraordinary gift. And I know we don't have unlimited time, but I just want to add that to add to the power of my journey, I had a calling to do San Pedro Huachuma as my closing ceremony, and I had no way to get it really, and I was asking around, and I finally procured it on the final day. And so for my final day of dieta, I got up in the morning, I created the container, and when I called into the north and I called on my ancestors to support me, I felt this wash of warmth and this knowing. And my plan was to go to the birthing cave, which I'd never been to and isn't on any, it's you have to follow instructions that you Google, but it's not really easy to find.
Wait, people used to do that?
I know, life before Google. What was that? I don't know. But I drink the medicine. I follow my instructions, and there's no phone signal. And I see a butterfly, and I see the path, and I see the the little landmarks that I was looking out for. And I thought, that my ancestors are with me. I go up to the birthing cave. I sit there by myself for a while and breathe it in and kind of feel into my final moments. And I'm getting ready to leave. And a woman walks in, and it's Anahata. And it was just a blessing and a gift. And so she helped me create a rebirth ceremony. She took me on a special hike where we went to a bluff and some cave dwellings I never would have seen otherwise. And I get home, and I go to close ceremony. I do it all. I finally get back on my phone. The first thing I see is that Don Howard passed away that morning. And I can't help but feel like he was the ancestor, the guide with me, with his medicine that he taught us all so much with. So by far the most special thing I've ever experienced. He's still with us.
Yeah, where do you think we're going? Where do you think I'm going, brother?
Exactly.
I
fell to my knees.
Man, I should have gone before you.
We need some levity. Let's bring it back.
Well, I this has been a year where I've felt called to different medicines. I've really explored, and at different times with everything going on, I've used those tools alongside many other non-medicinal tools, from all the forms of meditation to Tai Chi to walking with you guys and gals. And but I think if I look back on the year, there's been some equal points that were different. The Soltara trip was really healing for me to experience that with you, Kate, and Christian and Tosh, because I felt with your presence that deep community that we've built here, and that was really important for me to feel, to know that it's not just this little triad that we have, that there is a large community here in Austin, and to feel your love and to know that that exists. And it's so special. It's not something it can be forgotten in the own ecosystem of a family unit within one roof, you know? And I think having you there was really a big piece of that. It also, one of my intentions was to unpack any lasting jealousies that I had with Christian. And again, that circled back to my own belief. That's where I really started getting downloads in the medicine around that. And of course the challenges, like everything came up for me around that, you know, us all being in the same room, anytime they would snuggle, things like that, I would feel like, well, where's my snuggles? That kind of shit. And what's funny, in talking to Christian later, he felt the exact same thing, you know? So
you guys mastered it from
right?
the outside perspective, by the way. I was like, I want 2 boyfriends.
Sign me up. But yeah, that was really, really powerful in May. And then I had this long stretch of really being in the doing of things. And I forgot about the medicine. I forgot about not just the plant medicine. I forgot about the medicine in general, how I take care of myself and tend my garden on a daily basis. And when we were out in Sedona, I had this feeling like I want to recreate this experience I shared with some amazing people before, where I had, you know, a couple 100 micrograms of LSD on the mountain. And it's funny because I had spoken later about, you know, if you feel called to the microdose, do the microdose. If you end up having more, you might have been called to do the concert dose. If you go to the concert and you end up having a heroic dose, it's likely you were calling in a ceremony, right? And you just didn't recognize that by creating space prior to the ceremony to see that. And ended up having an unimaginably large dose of acid with Ian, because I thought that the bottle of liquid acid that I brought with me I thought the pressure of the airplane had let it leaked out. And what actually had happened, because there was far less in it on the microdose day, was it had evaporated from the dry heat in Arizona, from being in Arizona for a week. So when I reconstituted it with more water to make sure we'd get enough from it, it ended up being just way more than I ever would have wanted to do in a public place. You know, both of us ended up projectile vomiting. And of course, this is all fine in a ceremonial circumstance, set and setting, right? But in public and not being prepared for that, it was the most terrifying experience of my life. Never once have I thought 911 was an option. I've guided people, I've gone through my own work, and there was never a single time where I thought, like, I might need to go to the hospital, my friend might need to go to the hospital. And really thinking about, you know, his death was incredibly, I mean, I had fucking post-traumatic stress from it, you know, like really, I had to do a lot of work, a lot of grounding, and a lot of work to dump that, to let it move through me. And thankfully there was a lot of takeaways. But one of the things that I learned, because as we were up there, I recognized that I was on way higher of a dose than I thought I was, much, much higher. And to put it in perspective, at Burning Man, I had 5 hits of really good, proper LSD and a large amount of pharmaceutical MDMA. And I was riding my bicycle with a smile on my face. Never once experienced nausea. But up there on the mountain where I got all the downloads about 1.5 years ago, I was getting none. I couldn't even, I was asking, do we leave? Can we make it down the mountain? No downloads. And then again, you know, to your point, Ob, whether it's the highest version of Kyle or an outside source, you can leave that up to debate. I firmly believe that we do get the connection, the deeper connection to the outside source, or the deeper knowing of the source within. And that was cut off. That line of communication was gone. And it wasn't until we had some friends show up that were able to help us that I started getting downloads. And the first download was me taking a step to walk and to see if I could walk, and almost falling and thinking like, oh, there's going to be some serious bodily injury if we attempt. So let's just lay down. And we moved into a shady spot, not a shady spot, a spot with shade. And, you know, we put on East Forest. And right when I laid down next to Ian, I started getting all the downloads. But it only happened when the fear had moved away. And that lesson to me It's weird how the greater the challenge, the greater the lesson in a lot of circumstances. But that lesson to me shows me that that is exactly how it is in everyday life. That is exactly how it is in everyday waking consciousness. There is no intuition if I'm in a state of fear, if I'm in a state of panic. There is no knowing when I'm in fear. Even if I'm just have a low level of anxiety, I can think my way out of it, but that's not knowing. That's not the same. That's being in my headspace, not being in my heart space. And I took that lesson with me into every ceremony I've done since. And I've had some beautiful ones. You know, we had the start of your Dieta and the Music for Mushrooms album with East Forest, which is incredible. Tons of downloads from that, and just being centered and recognizing that whatever fear comes up, I need to let go of that and move through it quickly. And that's the only way to get to my knowing. And that's transformed every ceremony I've had since. I really haven't experienced medicine the same since then. And I've tried and experimented with a lot of cool things. The ketamine Joe Dispenza meditations are incredible. So many others that have been really transformative and beautiful. But I think that was the message that changed the way I look at my everyday waking consciousness.
Wow.
What a deep message. You know, I'm sitting here and I'm listening to all you guys share your stories and share everything. And overwhelmingly, I'm just incredibly humbled and honored to be in the company of such great people. You know, I remember feeling really alone for a lot of my life. And I think, you know, the first time I felt like community and friendship on that level was when I met Bodie Miller. And that was the first time like I felt like I had a real friend, you know, and someone that I admired. And I'm just sitting here listening to you guys and just such amazing gratitude and admiration. And it's really amazing, you know. And everybody may assume that I'm the, you know, fearless leader.
You are.
I mean, but honestly, like, you know, it's just so amazing to know that regardless of what I'm able to offer, that you are all here and so many people listening are all here, and that, you know, if one of us falls or if I can't carry on, that you'll pick up right where I left off no matter what. And it's just beautiful to the end. You know, I in quite contrast to Erick, I've started purging on every medicine, even medicines that I've never purged on before. So if I smoke DMT, I purge now. If I do mushrooms, I purge. And I think it's, you know, I'm unraveling some very deep programming and patterns, and my body is kind of retching out the kind of the you know, the way that the constant stress and the constant desire to compete and do has left a residue. Like the body keeps the score. It's, you know, a great book, and that my body has kept the score of this, and it's built up a residue, and it's telling me over and over again, like, this isn't the way forward, man. Like, something's got to change, but I haven't had the courage or the awareness or whatever to change that. So I can't point to one single ceremony this year, but I can point to what all of the ceremonies have shown me. The only one that I haven't purged on actually is 5-MeO, because I feel like that just rockets me straight to union with source. And it's like, bah, here I am in pure radical love. Like, everybody hug me.
There's no body to purge
There's no
from.
body to purge from.
It's obliteration.
Exactly. It's just like, it's obliteration into the all, and in the all, like, I'm fully complete, and there's no residue anymore, because I'm no body. I'm nobody. You know, and that's everybody, you know, and nobody, everybody, that's the same thing. And so, yeah, it's I think I have to look at my own experiences in totality and just recognize that it's, you know, it's time for me to really, you know, they classically say when you purge, it's not getting sick, it's getting well. And I'm in a long process of getting well. And I think all of you, watching you all get more well, is just inspiring and gives me even more courage and more permission and more incentive to do the same. And that's what having friends like you all is really all about. You know, it's just like being able to look at your brothers and sisters and be like, okay, like they're doing it, so can I can do this, you know, and not trying to maintain like this idea like, oh yeah, I've been at this a long time. You know, I remember when I first learned that I couldn't purge. I didn't need to purge. Yeah, that was good phase 1 for me too. You know, it's like, no, fuck, I'm so far from there. If I did ayahuasca, I would be just shitting and puking the whole time. I'd just be rolling around like fucking spectacle. But like, you know, and that's okay. It's okay that I am where I am, and I don't need to pretend like, oh, I'm in a fucking great spot, you know, and I got this fucking thing, you know. This is where I am, and that spot is great for me, and it's all good. One kind of notable one, and again, we're not like trying to tell everybody go out and do psychedelics and whatever. Like obviously Kyle told a story that was incredibly scary. I mean, he texted me. I remember I got a text from Kyle. I've never gotten a text like this. He goes, Aubrey, this is a life situation. And I go,
my phone's in 16 dimensions typing it.
I'm at the ranch, I'm at the ranch just writing, and like he's like, this is a life situation. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? And I knew it was bad though, because he's never not made sense before. I was like, fucking hell, does anybody have eyes on Kyle? And then I started getting some feedback, and I was really worried. I thought you fell. Like I thought you like fallen off the hike, you know? And I was like, fucking, this is like, and I started crying in the kitchen as I'm making my fucking chili dogs. And it's funny because I was making chili dogs, but
yeah,
pretty much ate
they're
chili
really
dogs
good.
like every other meal out there. But yeah, shout out to Kellen Fire Chili. Really good. Really good. But then I realized, then someone was like, oh, Kyle took way too much acid. I was like, oh, thank God. All right.
He'll make
He'll be all right. He'll be all right. It's like Alberto said, we can fix anything but dead. And I knew that can be a really incredibly challenging experience. But as long as you didn't fall, like you're gonna make it through. And it was obviously great to see you come in and be able to give you that big old hug, and Ian too on the backside of that. But yeah, I mean, one interesting experience I had was I had my first nitrous flood. Which was you wouldn't call it a psychedelic at all, and I'm not also recommending this. This is not a recommendation. Like whatever, you decide what you want to decide for yourself. But in the 5-MeO, what was so magical about it is the evaporation of self into the merge and the union with what you could call the all, or unicity. You know, you can use God if you want to, if you're comfortable with that word. I am. But as you become nothing, you become everything, and it's not the same. Nitrous is not the same as 5-MeO. It's a different experience with a different intensity and a different knob. But you do a flood of nitrous, and I'd never done this. A lot of people have, and I was like late to the party, I guess. 38, doing my first balloon of nitrous. But feeling my body again evaporate, I had a similar signature of like, oh, when I'm nothing, I'm everything, and it feels fucking awesome. And, like you got to that place. And I think for me, it's a place that there's just the deepest peace. There's the deepest peace in the evaporation of self, because the self for me holds so much anxiety and so much trying and so much doing. And so that was really interesting and surprising for me, because I thought it was like a party thing, and but it was actually really profound and just really helped me realize how, when you become nothing, like how much there is that's available. And when you get yourself out of the way. And so yeah, I think that's an overview of my medicine journeys for the year.
What a year.
What a year we've had, right? Wow. What a fucking year. Well, thanks for doing this, everybody.
Thank
you guys so much.
It's a total honor.
Love you all.
I'm excited to keep it going.
Yeah, likewise. And for those of you, we talked a lot about our Fit for Service. We're the 4 long-term coaches of that program, the Fit for Service Mastermind. For those listening now, we're accepting applications for 2020, and I know I'm really excited just to see what other, family comes through, because
Absolutely.
universally, like what we found was it wasn't just a group of people that we were coaching. This was a group of people that we were, pushing the same boulder with, and just like a real tribe that everybody ended up, ultimately falling in love with each other. And in this room right now are two people who are started off as members. I remember playing tetherball with Wyatt, and even though he's 7'11", I was still beating him at tetherball. But now he's here and doing an amazing job with the videos. Christian's come on and has been doing an incredible job too, and just the quality of human that we've been able to interact with, and watching how the group has also shown up for each other. I just had a meeting here with 2 different members who didn't know each other, who formed a new business. It sounds incredible together, and a lot of people have done the same. And
people are launching retreats and hosting their own masterminds. It's turned into something so much bigger.
Yeah.
And I absolutely. We're all in love with each other, and we want to fall in love with more people.
More people, yeah.
There's infinite love.
It truly feels like there's something reaching through us, bringing together people in a way that's making ripples in a way that we can't see. And it's completely an honor to be a part of whatever this thing is, and it feels so much bigger than us. And just thank you to everyone who showed up this year.
No doubt.
And Aubrey, for you for having the audacity to think that we could do this, man. Thank you.
Well, it took me a while. I remember I had the vision for this at Don Howard's, like the first time I did Wachuma.
Yeah.
And saw how going through that transformative Wachuma experience with everybody, because Wachuma is different than other medicines in that it's very communal. You're hiking together, you're walking together, you're exploring together, you're walking, rotating around the mesa together. It's eyes open. It's not eyes closed, your journey, the person next to you's journey. Like you're all collectively in this thing together. And it was this call of like, oh, like if we could galvanize this thing, it could be far greater than the sum of its parts. And I didn't know what it was going to be called then, but again, it came from Don Howard's words, which was to be fit for service, you have to be, to be of service, you have to be fit for service.
Yeah.
Something that he would always say. And that's where the idea was born. I was like, it starts here with us. And then ripples out.
And the quote that comes to mind is, never underestimate a small group of people who think that they can change the world, because in fact, those are the only people who ever have. And that's what this feels like.
Yeah. It's a special thing. So if anybody feels called to it, it's not for everybody, and we get that, and we love, and we're going to share everything like we did here, all the lessons and everything we learned. But if you feel called for it, just apply and see if it's the right fit, and we'll talk to you and we'll see if it's the right fit for you.
Yeah.
Can't wait to meet you guys.
Yeah, likewise. Well, some of you listening here will be hugging us in Tulum and Sedona and Montreal and Tahoe and all the places that we're going to go next year. So, and some of the existing people will still be there anchoring this new community too, which is going to be fucking awesome because I love those people.
Yeah. We're obsessed with you.
Yeah. All right. Caitlyn, your Instagram, everything, where can people find you?
At Caitlyn Howe _ that's CAITLYN HOWE_.
So complicated.
First, apparently there's a lot of Caitlyn Howe. Who would have thought?
Yeah, and mine's my name, Erick Godsey, CKGODSEY. You'll get it.
All these variations on the normal spelling here in this name. Thankfully, Kyle's just fucking Kyle.
And you got the Myths That Make Us podcast.
Yes, the Myths That Make Us.
Kyle Kingsbury podcast at Kingsboo on Instagram, Twitter, and the website, kingsboo.com.
Yeah. And a communal sorry to the guy who got punched in the ear, whose head was stuck between the ropes at Ellis Mania.
Sorry, not sorry.
Not a fight. Shit happens.
I really enjoyed that show thoroughly.
That was amazing, and that guy was great. He was giving us nothing but hugs and love at the end of that too. So all
Who
worked out.
doesn't want to get punched by Kyle Kingsbury?
Well, listen, they knew he was in the ring.
I don't.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I love you guys so much.
Love you, brother.
Yeah.
We love you guys.
Peace, everybody.